Hi, I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to another episode of Ohio Politics Explained, and happy August. Somehow, we're less than 100 days out from the November election. Today, we're discussing Governor Mike DeWine's redistricting take, how Ohio is modernizing state IDs, what Trump said about his running mate this week, and why the state is purging people from the voter rolls. With me today is Erin Glenn.
Happy to be here.
So probably the biggest news this week came from DeWine. He held a press conference the other day to spell out why he doesn't like the redistricting proposal going before voters in November. Reminder, this would create a 15-member citizen commission, and the folks on it can't have any major political ties. So think elected officials, lobbyists, that kind of thing. DeWine believes politicians shouldn't be involved in redistricting. Even still, he wants voters to reject this proposal. And he said he'll work with lawmakers to get a completely different plan on the ballot next year. What exactly is his beef with this?
Yeah, DeWine said that he prefers the Iowa criteria for grouping communities. And the Iowa plan is to have a nonpartisan legislative service commission draw the districts, and then lawmakers would approve them. It's kind of surprising that DeWine said that he likes this, because he said before that he wants politicians removed from the redistricting process.
Right.
And the nicest thing he had to say about the last redistricting process was that no one died.
Yeah, I think he compared it to the Spanish flu.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting because he has really been an outspoken critic of this, but he does not like the plan that's going on the ballot here. He says that it focuses too much on proportionality, which is when map makers tried to make the districts correspond to people's voting preferences, looking at data from the last elections. He said that is right for gerrymandering. Obviously, the backers of this measure agree and say that their plan would actually help combat gerrymandering, and that the biggest flaw with the Ohio system is the fact that elected officials have a seat at the table.
Yeah, it's interesting that DeWine did not back a competing redistricting amendment, which was kind of a behind-the-scenes discussion with Republican lawmakers. But yeah, he's made it clear that he does not approve of the amendment that's going to be on the ballot.
And it sounds like he wants to put a different proposal before voters, even if this passes in November. So it sounds like we may be hearing more about redistricting into 2025, regardless of what voters say at the ballot box in November, which I do find kind of interesting, because when you look at things like the abortion amendment and marijuana legalization, not a big fan of either of those things, but he said in those cases, the people had spoken and he was more or less going to leave it at that.
Right. And if this amendment passes and then another amendment passes, I guess Ohio would just be in a perpetual redistricting process.
Right. Especially because, I mean, we did this in 2015 and 2018, and here we are again. And, I think redistricting is top of mind for a lot of voters, even though it's pretty wonky. People don't like gerrymandering. People don't like either party having disproportionate control. And we've seen both Republicans and Democrats gerrymander across the country. In Ohio, the maps are much more favorable to Republicans, of course, but like in my home state of Illinois, for example, the maps are pretty gerrymandered in favor of Democrats. So I don't think a lot of voters like this. And, I think because of that, the chances of this passing are probably pretty good.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a process in any state that everybody is completely behind.
Our next topic is everyone's least favorite state agency, the BMV. But they unveiled some good news this week, at least if you're an iPhone user. Ohioans will be able to store a digital version of their state ID, an Apple Wallet. This will get you through TSA at John Glenn Airport in Columbus, and you can also use it to buy booze at an Ohio liquor store. The BMV and Casino Control Commission are also upgrading their systems so they can read digital IDs. But don't throw away your physical ID just yet.
Yeah, this is exciting. It's the looks like the same technology as when you get concert tickets or airline tickets in your Apple Wallet. Um, and there's also a new app, the Ohio Mobile ID, that you mentioned you can use at liquor stores. I'm for anything that would streamline the TSA process because I'm always worried I'm going to lose my ID while I'm scrambling to take off my shoes.
Yeah, seriously though. There are still going to be a lot of places where you can't use your mobile ID. Most notably, you're not going to be able to vote with that. You still need a physical copy of your ID. So that's probably the most important one. And then I don't know if we know, like, if, if you're at a restaurant, not necessarily a licensed liquor store, if they're going to take that as a state ID or how
Right.
that'll work.
And if you get pulled over by a state trooper, they're not going to take your mobile ID.
Our third topic is Trump's appearance this week at the National Association of Black Journalists conference. He fielded a lot of questions and made wildly inaccurate claims about Vice President Kamala Harris's racial identity. For our purposes, though, he also talked about his running mate, Ohio Senator JD Vance. Vance has had a tough couple weeks. Democrats, along with much of the internet, have attacked him over his childless cat ladies remark. He got mocked for an awkward joke about Diet Mountain Dew, but Trump is still standing by his pick for VP. What did he have to say at the conference?
Yeah, Trump said that Vance's childless cat lady's remark in response to a question about that, Trump said that Vance, believes that family is very important. And he said that Vance's difficult upbringing um, might help him relate to more working class voters. But Trump also said that the vice president historically doesn't matter that much in elections and said that people are voting for him, Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting point to make. He said that in response to a question about whether he thought that Vance would be ready on day one to take over if necessary. Obviously, Trump just survived an assassination attempt. He's not young, so Trump kind of sidestepped that one and just said, this is about him, which I think is fundamentally true. I'm not sure how much a VP pick sways voters at the end of the day, but it was still kind of interesting. Let's wrap up today with Ohio's latest voter purge. Secretary of State Frank LaRose said he removed 499 non-US citizens from the voter rolls as part of a review by his office. You have to be a citizen to vote in elections under state and federal law, including an amendment to the Ohio Constitution passed by voters in 2022. On top of that, election officials removed about 155,000 inactive registrations from the rolls. We're still waiting on a final number on that front, but what do we know about like what those registrations were, who those folks were?
Yeah, so they were moving people who've moved to a new address and failed to update their registration, or, engage in voter activity like voting over the past 4 years. People whose information doesn't match their records at the BMV, and registrations that have been previously flagged for removal but are still on the rolls.
Yeah, so this is a routine process that Ohio undergoes every several years, and voters do get notices in the mail to try to give them the chance to maintain their registration, but this has always been a really controversial process. A lot of voting rights advocates don't think this is an effective way to get people to clean up the voter rolls when it comes to citizens versus non-citizens. They say someone's citizenship can change very rapidly. And so if you look at the data one day, they may not show up as a citizen, but that could change in a week or a month. So it's always been a pretty heated thing. And I remember last year they started doing this when early voting had already started, specifically military overseas voting had already started for the November election last year. So that made some noise.
Yeah, pretty controversial. And I imagine the OPE listeners are pretty plugged in already, but you can look up your voter registration on the Secretary of State's website.
Yes, and for anyone who is not registered, or if you mistakenly had your registration canceled, you can still register to vote in the November election. I can't remember the exact date, but you have until October. And one more thing before you go. Ohio lawmakers don't like synthetic turf. A new bill would require athletic fields to be at least 90% grass, and backers say this will make players safer. The Browns and Columbus Crew play on grass, while the Bengals play on turf. So let the turf wars begin, I guess.
Yeah, I imagine the Bengals organization will have plenty to say about this because natural grass never really took in that field. I think they had it from 2000 to 2004, and it was consistently ranked. Players said it was their worst field to play on in the NFL. So if this passes, we'll see if grass works out better in Paycor Stadium.
Ohio Politics Explained is brought to you by the USA Today Network Ohio Bureau. You can check us out on X, formerly known as Twitter, @Ohio Explained.